The knock on the door came at exactly 7 in the morning, and Penelope Harris nearly dropped her coffee mug when she opened it to find a man in an expensive charcoal suit, standing on her apartment building's worn doorstep with a bouquet of sunflowers that must have cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "Miss Harris." His voice was deep, confident, the kind of voice that belonged to someone used to getting what they wanted. "I'm Carter Everett. I don't know if you remember me, but you taught my sophomore English class at Roosevelt High 15 years ago." Penelope blinked, her brain struggling to connect the polished, broad-shouldered man before her with any of the fidgety teenagers who had filled her classroom during those early teaching years. She was 38 now, and those days felt like a lifetime ago, back when she still had the energy to stay up grading papers until midnight and believed she could change the world one essay at a time. "Carter Everett," she repeated slowly, and then something clicked. "Wait, Carter. The one who wrote that incredible piece about his grandmother's immigration story." His face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look less intimidating despite the obvious wealth radiating from his tailored clothes and the sleek black car parked behind him. "You remember?" "Of course I remember. That essay made me cry in the teacher's lounge." She looked down at herself, suddenly aware she was wearing old sweatpants and a faded Roosevelt High t-shirt from a decade ago. "What are you doing here? Can I come in? I have a proposition for you." Penelope hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. Her apartment was small, cluttered with books and papers, a far cry from whatever penthouse or mansion this man probably called home. But Carter didn't seem to notice or care as he settled onto her worn couch, placing the sunflowers carefully on the coffee table. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "I run a foundation now, the Everett Foundation for Educational Excellence. We fund literacy programs, scholarship initiatives, teacher training. Last month, we acquired an old building downtown that we're converting into a community learning center, and I need someone to run it. Someone who actually understands what teaching means, not just someone with an MBA who sees it as another line on a resume." Penelope sat down slowly in the armchair across from him. "And you thought of me. You were the only teacher who ever made me feel like my words mattered. My home life was chaos back then. My dad had just left, my mom was working 3 jobs, and I was angry at everything, but you gave me a place where I could turn all that into something meaningful." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "I've been trying to track you down for months. You're not on social media, you changed your phone number, and the school said you left teaching 5 years ago." "I burned out," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. 20 years of fighting for supplies, watching talented kids fall through the cracks because the system failed them, being told my passion didn't matter as much as test scores. I work at a bookstore now. It's quieter." "Is it what you want, though?" The question hung in the air between them. Penelope looked away, focusing on the sunflowers, their bright petals almost obscene in their cheerfulness against the drab surroundings of her apartment. "What I want doesn't pay the bills," she said finally. "This would. 6-figure salary, full benefits, complete creative control over programming. I'm not asking you to go back into a broken system. I'm asking you to help me build something new." It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. Penelope had learned long ago that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "Why me specifically? You could hire anyone." "Because I don't want anyone. I want the woman who saw potential in an angry 15-year-old kid and helped him find his voice. I want someone who cares more about the work than the paycheck." He paused. "Though the paycheck is excellent, I promise." Despite herself, Penelope laughed. It was a rusty sound, like she didn't do it often enough anymore. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. Here's my card. My personal cell is on the back. He stood, and Penelope noticed he was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that probably served him well in boardrooms. I hope you'll say yes, Miss Harris. Penelope, she corrected. I'm not your teacher anymore. Something flickered across his face, an expression she couldn't quite read. Penelope, he repeated, and the way he said her name made something warm unfurl in her chest. After he left, she sat on her couch for a long time, holding his business card and staring at the sunflowers. They were her favorite, something she had mentioned once in passing during a class discussion about imagery in poetry. The fact that he had remembered that detail after 15 years felt significant in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She called him 3 days later. I'll do it, she said when he answered, no preamble or small talk, but I have conditions. Name them. He sounded pleased, like he had known all along what her answer would be. I want input on hiring. I want a budget for community outreach. And I want a clause in my contract that says if this becomes about profit over people, I can walk away with no penalties. Done, done, and done. Can you start Monday? That was how Penelope found herself standing in front of a massive brick building in downtown Seattle on a rainy October morning, watching construction crews haul equipment in and out, while Carter gave her a tour of what would become the Roosevelt Community Learning Center. We'll have tutoring spaces here, he explained, gesturing to a large open room with high ceilings and huge windows. Computer labs in the East Wing, a library on the second floor, and this, he led her to the back of the building, will be the heart of it all. The room he showed her was enormous, with hardwood floors and a small stage at one end. A theater, she asked. A multipurpose space. Theater, yes, but also readings, presentations, community gatherings. You told us once that stories have the power to transform lives. I want this to be a place where people can share their stories. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back quickly. You really listened, didn't you? Back then, I mean. You were the first adult who ever talked to me like I had something worth saying. Of course I listened. He turned to face her fully, and she realized how close they were standing in the empty room. Every success I've had, I can trace back to that classroom and the confidence you gave me. I'm sure that's not true. You clearly have drive and talent. I do now, but at 15. I was one bad decision away from dropping out, from following the same path as half the kids in my neighborhood. You changed that trajectory. The intensity in his voice made her uncomfortable, not because it was unwelcome, but because she didn't know what to do with it. She had spent the last 5 years convinced her teaching career had been a failure, that she had wasted 2 decades on a system that didn't care. Having Carter stand here, this successful man who had somehow built an empire, telling her she had mattered, was overwhelming. What do you do exactly? She asked, partly to change the subject. To afford all this, I mean. Restaurants, he said. I started with a food truck after college, turned it into a small cafe, then another, and eventually a whole chain. Everett's Kitchen. We focus on affordable, healthy food in underserved neighborhoods. Turns out there's a market for accessible good food, and once we proved the model, investors came running. Everett's Kitchen, she repeated. I've seen those. There's one near the bookstore where I work. Worked, she corrected herself. Past tense now. You're mine. He caught himself immediately, his ears going slightly red. I mean, you work for the foundation, with me. Not mine. That sounded weird. It was the first time she had seen him flustered, and it made him seem more human, less like the polished businessman who had shown up at her door. Penelope found herself smiling. It's okay. I knew what you meant. Over the next 3 months, Penelope threw herself into the work with an energy she hadn't felt in years. She interviewed candidates for teaching positions, designed curriculum, reached out to community organizations, and spent long hours at the center watching it slowly transform from a construction site into something magical. Carter was there almost every day, despite running a restaurant empire that probably required his attention elsewhere. He would show up in the mornings with coffee, stay to help paint walls or assemble furniture, and linger in the evenings to discuss plans and dream bigger. "We should have a music program," Penelope said one night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of what would become the library, surrounded by boxes of donated books they were sorting. Carter looked up from the mystery novels he was alphabetizing. "Okay, what would that look like?" "Instrument lending program, maybe, and lessons for kids who can't afford private instruction. Nothing formal, just access and opportunity. I'll make some calls." He said it so casually, like funding an entire music program was as simple as ordering lunch. "Does money just solve everything in your world?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Carter set down the book he was holding and met her eyes. "No, but it solves some things, and I'd rather use it to solve those things than not. Does that bother you?" "I don't know," Penelope admitted. "I spent so long fighting for scraps, writing grant proposals for $100 here and there. It's surreal to work with someone who just says yes to everything." "I don't say yes to everything. I say yes to you because your ideas are good and because I trust your judgment." He paused. "Is that the only thing that bothers you about this?" "What do you mean?" "You've been different lately. More distant. I thought maybe I was overstepping." Penelope looked down at her hands, at the dust from old books that coated her fingers. The truth was that she had been feeling strange around Carter for weeks now, hyper-aware of his presence in a way that felt unprofessional. He was her employer, technically, and more importantly, he had been her student. The age difference bothered her even though he was 33 now, a grown man who had lived a whole life since sitting in her classroom. It still felt wrong to notice the way his sleeves rolled up revealed strong forearms, or how his laugh made her want to say funny things just to hear it again. "You're not overstepping," she said finally. "I'm just adjusting. This is all very new for me." He seemed to accept that answer, or at least didn't push further. They went back to sorting books in comfortable silence, though Penelope caught him watching her once or twice with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. The Roosevelt Community Learning Center opened its doors on a cold January morning, exactly 6 months after Carter had first appeared on Penelope's doorstep. The turnout was overwhelming. Families lined up around the block to tour the facilities, sign up for programs, and attend the opening ceremony where Penelope gave a speech about the power of education and second chances. Carter stood at the back of the crowd, watching her with unmistakable pride, and when their eyes met across the room, something passed between them that felt significant and terrifying. The reception afterward was chaos in the best way. Kids ran through the halls exploring, parents asked questions about enrollment, and the local press took photos of everything. Penelope was in the middle of explaining their scholarship program to a reporter when she felt a hand on her elbow. "Can I steal you for a minute?" Carter's voice was low in her ear. She excused herself and followed him through the crowd, up the stairs to the second floor, and finally out onto a small balcony she hadn't even known existed. The Seattle skyline spread out before them, gray and beautiful under winter clouds. "I wanted to give you something," Carter said, pulling a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket, "before I lost my courage." "Carter, you don't need to give me anything. You've already done so much. Just open it, please." Inside the box was a vintage pen, beautiful and clearly expensive, with intricate engravings along the barrel. "It's gorgeous," Penelope breathed. It belonged to my grandmother, the one I wrote about in that essay. She used it to write letters to my grandfather during the war, and later to write down all her stories from the old country. My mother gave it to me when I graduated college, and I've carried it ever since. He cleared his throat. You told me once that words have power, that our stories matter. You gave me the courage to believe that. I want you to have this. Penelope looked up at him, this man who had somehow become so important to her life in just a few months, and felt something crack open in her chest. I can't accept this. It's too much, too personal. Then consider it a loan. Keep it until you believe what I'm about to tell you. He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and clean. Penelope, you changed my life twice now. Once when I was a kid who needed someone to see him, and again 6 months ago when you agreed to build this dream with me. Working with you has been the best part of every single day. Carter. His name came out as barely a whisper. I know this is complicated. I know I was your student once, and I know I'm technically your boss now, though we can change that if you want. I can restructure things so we're equals in the foundation, but what I can't change is how I feel about you. How you feel. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I'm falling for you. Actually, I think I've been falling for you since the moment you opened your door in those ridiculous sweatpants and still somehow looked beautiful. He laughed, running a hand through his hair. I tried to fight it. I told myself I was being an idiot, that you'd never see me as anything but that kid from your English class. But then we'd stay up late talking about books and education and dreams, and I'd watch you light up when you talked about the work, and I fell. Penelope couldn't breathe. Everything she had been trying not to feel, all the attraction and warmth and connection she had been pushing down for months, came rushing to the surface. I'm 7 years older than you. I don't care. You were my student. 15 years ago. We're different people now. What if this ruins everything we've built? What if it makes everything better? He reached out tentatively, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. And if you don't feel the same way, we'll never talk about it again. We'll just keep being colleagues and friends, and that will be enough. But what if it's not enough? The words escaped before she could stop them. What if I've been fighting the same thing for months, telling myself it was wrong and inappropriate and impossible? His eyes widened. Penelope, I notice everything about you, she continued, the confession pouring out now that she had started. The way you bring me coffee exactly how I like it, the way you actually listen when I talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak, the way you look at me sometimes like I'm something precious. It terrifies me. Why terrifying? Because I already failed at this once. I was married in my 20s, divorced by 30. I threw everything into teaching and told myself I was fine alone. Then you showed up and made me want things I thought I was done wanting. What things? She looked up at him, at this man who had somehow become her partner and friend and maybe something more. Partnership. Companionship. Someone to build a life with, not just a project. Carter moved closer, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. Can I kiss you? Instead of answering, Penelope closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then Carter's arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her close, and Penelope let herself sink into it, into him, into all the feelings she had been denying for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Carter pressed his forehead to hers. I've been wanting to do that since you laughed at my joke about the construction delays. That was a terrible joke. You still laughed. She smiled against his lips. I'm probably going to have a lot of doubts about this, a lot of moments where I panic and overthink. That's okay. I'm patient. And I'm not going anywhere. He pulled back enough to look at her seriously. But I need you to know something. This isn't a whim for me, and it's not gratitude or nostalgia or whatever else you might be worried about. I'm in love with you, the woman you are now. The woman who fights for kids she's never met, who sorts books at midnight because she wants everything perfect, who cries at donation letters and gets excited about ordering supplies. You love me. Her voice cracked on the words. Completely. Probably have been for months, if I'm honest. Penelope felt tears slip down her cheeks and Carter wiped them away with his thumbs. I'm not there yet, she admitted, but I think I could be. I think I'm already halfway there. Halfway is a good start. They stayed on the balcony for a long time, talking through logistics and concerns, agreeing to keep things quiet at first while they figured out what this meant, planning a real date for the following weekend. When they finally returned to the reception, Penelope felt lighter than she had in years, like something that had been locked tight inside her had finally opened. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood Penelope didn't know well, far enough from the center that they were unlikely to run into anyone they knew. Carter picked her up at her apartment in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit, looking younger and more relaxed. You're nervous, Penelope observed as they drove. Terrified, he admitted. I've been planning this for days. I want it to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be us. He reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. The gesture was simple but intimate, and Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest. Dinner was easy in a way she hadn't expected. They talked about everything and nothing, books they loved, places they wanted to travel, embarrassing stories from their pasts. Carter told her about building his business, the failures and near bankruptcies before things finally clicked. Penelope shared stories from her teaching days, the students who had broken her heart and the ones who had given her hope. Do you miss it? Carter asked over dessert. Teaching, I mean. Sometimes. I miss the connections with students, the moment when something clicks and you can see understanding dawn in their eyes. She paused, considering. But what we're doing now feels bigger somehow. We're not just helping individual kids. We're creating a space where whole communities can grow. We make a good team. We do, she agreed and felt herself smile. After dinner, they walked through the neighborhood despite the cold, their breath forming clouds in the winter air. Carter kept his arm around her shoulders, and Penelope leaned into his warmth. Can I ask you something? She said. When did this start for you? This feeling? He was quiet for a moment, thinking. There wasn't one moment, it was a build-up. But I think I knew for sure the day we were arguing about paint colors for the children's reading room. You were so passionate about this specific shade of blue, talking about how color affects mood and learning. You had paint samples everywhere, and you were gesturing so wildly you got blue paint in your hair. And I just looked at you and thought, this is the person I want to make decisions with for the rest of my life. That's so mundane. That's what made it real. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. It was just you being you, caring deeply about something small because everything matters to you. Penelope stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Take me home, she said quietly. What? Your home? I want to see where you live. Carter's apartment was a penthouse in downtown Seattle with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that probably cost more than Penelope would make in several years. But what struck her wasn't the obvious wealth. It was how much of a home he had made it. Books overflowed from shelves, plants lined the windows, and the kitchen was clearly well used, with copper pots hanging from hooks and a herb garden growing on the counter. I spend a lot of time here, Carter explained, watching her take it in. I know it's a lot of space for one person, but I like having room to breathe. It suits you. She walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. "You can see the center from here." He came to stand beside her. "I know. I watch the lights come on every night and think about what we're building." Penelope turned to him, rising on her toes to kiss him. This kiss was different from the one on the balcony, deeper and more certain. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Stay," he murmured into her hair. "Not for anything. Just stay. We can watch a movie, talk more, whatever you want. I just want more time with you." She did stay, curled up on his couch watching an old film neither of them paid much attention to, too caught up in each other. They kissed until Penelope's lips felt swollen, until Carter's careful control started to slip, and she could feel him trembling with the effort of holding back. "I should go," she whispered, though she made no move to leave. "Before this goes somewhere we're not ready for." "You're probably right." He pressed one more kiss to her forehead. "But for the record, I'd be ready for anywhere with you." Over the following months, they fell into a rhythm. They kept their relationship private at work, professional and focused during center hours. But evenings and weekends belonged to them. They cooked together in Carter's kitchen, went to bookstores and farmers' markets, took weekend trips to the coast where they walked on beaches and talked until late into the night. Penelope met his mother in March, a warm woman who worked as a nurse and welcomed Penelope with fierce hugs and embarrassing stories about Carter as a child. "He talked about you, you know," she told Penelope over coffee while Carter was in the kitchen. "After that English class. He came home different, like someone had finally seen him for who he could be." "He was always special," Penelope said. "I just gave him space to prove it. And now look at you both, building something beautiful together." She reached over and patted Penelope's hand. "I'm glad he found you again." Carter introduced Penelope to his friends and business partners, people who clearly respected him and were genuinely happy to see him in love. She introduced him to her sister, who lived in Portland and had been begging to meet the mysterious man Penelope kept mentioning in their weekly phone calls. "He's really hot," her sister Melissa whispered at dinner. "Like obscenely hot, and he looks at you like you hung the moon." "Stop," Penelope hissed, feeling her face heat. "I'm just saying you did good. After that disaster with David, I was worried you'd given up." The mention of her ex-husband made Penelope wince, but Carter caught her eye across the table and smiled, and the old hurt faded. In April, they told the staff at the center about their relationship. Penelope had been nervous about the announcement, worried about judgment or awkwardness, but the reactions were universally positive. Most people admitted they had suspected for weeks. "You two aren't as subtle as you think," said Marcus, one of the lead instructors, grinning. "The way you look at each other is pretty obvious." "We look at each other normally," Carter protested. "Sure, boss. Keep telling yourself that." That night, lying in Carter's bed with the city lights glowing through the windows, Penelope felt more content than she had in years. Carter's arm was draped over her waist, his breathing slow and even against her neck. "I love you," she said into the darkness. She felt him go still. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, turning to face him. "I think I have for a while, but I was scared to say it. Scared it was too fast or too much, or that I'd somehow mess this up. But I love you, and I don't want to wait any more to tell you." Carter kissed her, deep and thorough, before pulling back with a smile that looked almost giddy. "Say it again." "I love you, Carter Everett." "I love you too." "So damn much." They made love slowly that night, taking their time to learn each other, and afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about the future for the first time in concrete terms. "Move in with me," Carter said. "I know your lease isn't up until August, but I want you here. I want to wake up next to you every morning. That's a big step. We've already taken big steps. This is just the next one." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. I'm not playing around here, Penelope. I want everything with you. Living together, marriage eventually, maybe kids if you want them. I want to build a life, not just go through the motions. Kids, her voice came out strangled. I'm almost 40. So, women have babies in their 40s all the time, but if you don't want that, it's okay too. I just want you to know I'm thinking long-term here. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes again. She had mourned the loss of potential children when her marriage ended, convinced that ship had sailed. Hearing Carter say he wanted that future with her felt like being handed back something she had already grieved. I'd have to think about it, she managed. The kid thing, I mean, but moving in, yes, I want that. Yeah, my apartment is depressing anyway, and your kitchen is much better. He laughed and kissed her again, and they fell asleep tangled together, planning. The center's 1-year anniversary in January was a major celebration. They had served over 500 families in that first year, seen test scores improve, watched kids discover talents in art and music and technology. Local politicians attended the event, praising the innovative model. National education publications wrote articles about their approach. Carter was offered interviews with major networks. Through it all, Penelope remained the driving force behind the programs, the heart of the operation. She knew every family by name, remembered details about kids' lives, showed up early and stayed late to make sure everyone felt welcome. You're going to burn out again, Carter warned one evening when he found her at the center at 9 o'clock, still reviewing applications for the summer program. I'm fine. You're exhausted. Come home. This can wait until tomorrow. There are kids counting on these decisions. And they need you rested and healthy, not running on fumes. He sat down next to her, taking the papers from her hands gently. I know you love this work. I love that you love it. But you matter too. You have to take care of yourself. She leaned against him, feeling the exhaustion she had been fighting. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They went home and Carter cooked dinner while Penelope took a long bath. Later, curled up together on the couch, he brought up something that had clearly been on his mind. I want to expand, he said. Open more centers in other cities. Use what we've learned here to help more communities. That's ambitious. I have the money, we have the model, you have the expertise. Why not? Because I can barely manage one center. How am I supposed to oversee multiple? We hire people you trust. Train them in your approach. You become more of a director of operations, focusing on the big picture while others handle the daily details. He turned to look at her. I know it's scary to let go of control, but think about the impact we could have. Penelope considered it, the idea both thrilling and terrifying. I'd need to be involved in every hiring decision. Absolutely. And we maintain the same standards everywhere, no cutting corners to save money. I wouldn't have it any other way. Then okay, let's do it. Over the next year, they opened 3 more centers in Portland, San Francisco, and Denver. Each one was tailored to its community's specific needs while maintaining the core principles they had established in Seattle. Penelope traveled constantly in those months, training new staff and overseeing openings. Carter traveled with her when he could, and they turned the trips into adventures, exploring new cities and stealing time together between meetings. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and Penelope had never felt more alive. They got engaged in October, 2 years after Carter had first knocked on her door. He proposed at the original center, in the multipurpose room where he had first confessed his feelings. He had convinced her they were there for a late meeting, but when she walked in, the room was filled with candles and flowers, and Carter was waiting in the center of it all, nervous and hopeful. I had a whole speech planned, he said as she stood there, hand over her mouth. Something about stories and new chapters and how every good narrative needs a turning point. But standing here, all I can think is that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to keep building dreams together, keep falling more in love, keep choosing each other every single day. Penelope Harris, will you marry me? Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. The ring was simple and perfect, a single diamond on a platinum band. She barely looked at it before throwing her arms around him, kissing him with everything she had. They planned a small wedding for the following spring, just family and close friends at a garden venue outside the city. The weeks leading up to it were chaotic with last-minute details and work demands, but underneath it all, Penelope felt a deep sense of rightness. Are you nervous? Her sister asked the morning of the wedding, helping her into her dress. Not even a little, Penelope answered honestly. I've never been more sure of anything. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising partnership and patience, laughter and late-night conversations, support through every challenge and celebration of every success. When the officiant pronounced them married and Carter kissed her, Penelope felt like every difficult moment of her past had led her exactly where she was meant to be. At the reception, Carter's mother gave a tearful toast about watching her son become a man, about the teacher who had seen his potential, and the woman who had captured his heart being one and the same. Penelope's sister joked about setting impossible standards for romance. Their friends from the center presented them with a photo album documenting their journey from that first opening day to now. Thank you, Penelope whispered to Carter during their first dance, for finding me again, for being patient, for building this life with me. Thank you for taking a chance on a kid who needed you and then on the man who loved you. He kissed her forehead. This is just the beginning, you know. We have so much more ahead of us. She thought about the future, about the centers they would open, the children they might have, the years of waking up next to this man who had somehow become her whole heart. I can't wait, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of wandering through ancient cities, eating incredible food and forgetting about work entirely. They talked about everything and nothing, made love in hotel rooms with views of the Mediterranean, and returned home tanned and relaxed, and somehow even more in love than when they had left. Life settled into a new normal after the wedding. They worked together, but maintained their own spaces and projects. Carter continued to expand his restaurant business while overseeing the foundation's finances. Penelope focused on the learning centers, now 6 locations with plans for more. They hosted dinners at their home, took weekend trips, made time for quiet evenings where they just existed together. The conversation about children came up again a year after the wedding. They were in bed on a lazy Sunday morning, rain pattering against the windows, when Carter brought it up. Have you thought more about kids? He asked, his hand tracing patterns on her stomach. I've thought about it constantly, Penelope admitted. I'm 41 now. If we're going to do this, we need to decide soon. What do you want? She rolled to face him, searching his eyes. I want to try. I'm scared it might not happen, scared I'm too old, scared of failing, but I want to try. His face broke into a brilliant smile. Then let's try. It took 6 months and 1 miscarriage that broke both their hearts before Penelope got pregnant again. This time, everything held. She was sick for the first trimester, exhausted through the second, and uncomfortable through the third. But Carter was there for all of it, patient and supportive and excited beyond measure. Their daughter was born on a clear morning in late April, 2 days before Penelope's 42nd birthday. They named her Grace Helen, after both their grandmothers, and she was perfect in the way all babies are perfect to their parents. Carter cried when he held her for the first time. This grown man who ran companies and foundations reduced to tears by a 7-pound infant. "Thank you," he kept saying to Penelope. "Thank you for her. Thank you for everything." Parenthood was harder than either of them expected and more wonderful than they could have imagined. Grace was colicky and demanding, and those first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. But there were also moments of pure joy. Watching her smile for the first time, hearing her laugh, seeing Carter with her, and knowing she was witnessing something profound. They adjusted their work schedules to share parenting duties. Carter cut back on travel, and Penelope promoted trusted staff to handle more of the daily operations at the centers. They figured it out as they went, making mistakes and learning from them, always choosing each other and their daughter first. Grace was 2 when they started talking about another baby. "I know it's crazy," Penelope said. "I'm 44. The risks go up every year, but I don't want her to be an only child." "Then let's try again," Carter said simply, as if it were the easiest decision in the world. Their son, Christopher, was born when Grace had just turned 3. The delivery was more complicated, and Penelope needed a cesarean section, but mother and baby came through healthy. Christopher was calmer than his sister had been, a mellow baby who seemed content to observe the world. "We're outnumbered now," Carter joked in the hospital, holding Christopher while Grace climbed onto the bed to meet her new brother. "Best decision we ever made," Penelope replied, watching her family with a heart so full it ached. The years that followed were busy and beautiful. They opened more learning centers, eventually expanding to 15 cities across the country. The Everett Foundation became nationally recognized for its innovative approach to community education. Penelope was invited to speak at conferences, wrote articles for education journals, and consulted with school districts looking to replicate their model. But the work never consumed her the way teaching once had, because she had learned to balance. She had Carter to keep her grounded, children who needed her present, a life that mattered outside the professional accomplishments. Grace grew into a precocious child who loved books as much as her parents, often curling up with a stack taller than she was. Christopher was quieter but creative, always drawing or building elaborate structures with blocks. They fought and played and filled the apartment with noise and joy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Carter surprised Penelope with a weekend away, just the 2 of them. They left the kids with his mother and drove to a cabin in the mountains, miles from cell service and responsibility. "I can't believe it's been 10 years, Penelope said, sitting on the cabin's porch and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Feels like yesterday and forever at the same time." Carter sat beside her, pulling her against his side. "Do you ever regret it, saying yes that day? Not for a single second. Best decision I ever made was tracking you down." He kissed the top of her head. "I mean second best. Best decision was writing that essay about my grandmother and hoping you'd notice." She laughed. "You were 15. You weren't making decisions to get my attention. Shows what you know. I rewrote that thing 7 times trying to make it good enough. It was always good enough. You were always enough." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, and Penelope thought about the improbable journey that had led them here. From teacher and student to colleagues to partners to this, a life built on love and trust and choosing each other every day. "Do you think we're done?" Carter asked. "With centers, I mean. Or do you want to keep expanding?" "I think we're at a good place. 15 centers reaching thousands of families. Maybe it's time to focus on deepening the work instead of widening it." "I was hoping you'd say that." He shifted to look at her. "I've been thinking about stepping back from the restaurant business, selling my stake to my partners and focusing on the foundation full time. I miss working with you every day." "You'd really do that?" The restaurants were always a means to an end. A way to prove I could build something successful, to earn the money to do work that matters. But the foundation is the work that matters. You taught me that. We could be together all the time, Penelope mused. That's either romantic or a recipe for disaster. I'm betting on romantic. She kissed him, pouring a decade of love into it. Me too. Carter sold his stake in Everett's kitchen 6 months later, and they restructured the foundation so they could co-direct it together. It was the right decision for both of them, allowing them to shape the organization's future while still being present for their children. Grace started kindergarten at a public school near their apartment, and Penelope felt a particular kind of pride watching her daughter walk into a classroom. Christopher began preschool at one of their learning centers, and Penelope loved seeing him benefit from the programs she had helped create. Life wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes about work decisions or parenting approaches. Money was never a problem, but they disagreed about how much to spoil the kids versus teaching them the value of things. Carter wanted to give them everything. Penelope wanted them to understand privilege and responsibility. They found compromises mostly, and when they couldn't, they talked it through until they reached understanding. But through it all, the foundation of their relationship remained solid. They still had date nights, still made time for just the two of them. They still stayed up late talking about dreams and ideas. They still chose each other first. On Penelope's 50th birthday, Carter threw her a surprise party at the original learning center. The multipurpose room was filled with people whose lives had been touched by her work, students from her teaching days, families from all 15 centers, staff members and friends and their growing children. "This is too much," she told him, overwhelmed by the crowd and the love. "It's not nearly enough," he replied. "These are just the people who could make it tonight. There are thousands more whose lives you've changed." They showed a video compilation of testimonials, people sharing how the learning centers had impacted them, how Penelope's vision had created opportunities they never thought possible. She cried through most of it, Carter's hand steady in hers. When it was his turn to speak, Carter talked about the teacher who had saved him, the woman who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself, the partner who had built something extraordinary alongside him, the mother of his children, the love of his life. "You told me once that stories have the power to transform lives," he said. "Our story, the one we've written together, has transformed mine in ways I couldn't have imagined. And the best part is, we're not done yet. There are so many chapters still to write." Grace and Christopher presented her with a book they had made, filled with drawings and stories about their favorite memories with her. Penelope held it like the treasure it was, knowing this would be among her most prized possessions forever. The party lasted late into the night, and when they finally got home and put the exhausted children to bed, Penelope and Carter collapsed onto their couch together. "That was incredible," Penelope said. "Thank you. You deserve incredible every single day." He pulled her closer and she snuggled into his embrace. "I meant what I said tonight, about not being done. I'm excited for everything still ahead of us. Growing old together," Penelope said. "Watching the kids grow up, maybe grandkids someday, though let's hope that's far in the future. Building more programs, traveling when we can, all of it." "All of it," Carter agreed. "With you, I want all of it." They sat in the quiet of their home, the city lights glowing through the windows, and Penelope felt a deep sense of completion. Not the kind that meant things were finished, but the kind that meant she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly who she was supposed to be with. The years continued to unfold in the way years do, with joys and challenges, milestones and ordinary moments that somehow mattered most. Grace excelled in school and discovered a love for theater. Christopher found his passion in music, learning piano and guitar. They grew from children into young people with their own dreams and personalities, and Penelope and Carter learned to parent with open hands, guiding without controlling. The foundation expanded its programs to include workforce development for adults, mental health resources, and family counseling. They partnered with other organizations, trained leaders in their methodology, and watched their models spread even beyond the centers they directly operated. Carter's mother passed away when Grace was 12, and they grieved together as a family, teaching their children about loss and memory and honoring the people who shaped us. Penelope's sister moved to Seattle to be closer to them, and the cousins became almost like siblings, enriching everyone's lives. Through it all, Penelope and Carter remained partners in every sense. They still worked together, still dreamed together, still found time for each other despite the demands of children and careers. Their love had evolved from that first intense spark into something deeper and more enduring, the kind of love that didn't need constant declarations, because it was woven into every action and choice. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same garden where they had first married, with Grace and Christopher standing beside them as witnesses. They were older now, with gray starting to thread through their hair and lines earned from years of laughter and tears. But when Carter looked at Penelope and promised again to choose her every day, his eyes held the same intensity they had 2 decades earlier. "I would do it all again," Penelope told him that night, dancing in their living room to no music but what they made together. Every choice, every risk, every moment of uncertainty, it all led here, and here is perfect. "I love you," Carter said, the words as true as they had ever been. "My teacher, my partner, my wife, my everything. I love you too. My student who became my equal, my collaborator, my home." They swayed together in the quiet, and somewhere in the apartment, their children were doing homework or playing games or being teenagers in all the ways teenagers are. The foundation they had built, both literally and figuratively, stood strong. The future stretched ahead of them, still full of possibilities and promises to keep. And Penelope thought about that morning 20 years ago when Carter had knocked on her door with sunflowers and a proposition, when she had been lost and burned out and certain her best days were behind her. She thought about how wrong she had been, how the best days had actually been just beginning. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories started with a simple moment of saying yes. Yes to possibility, yes to risk, yes to love in all its unexpected forms. And sometimes the student who needed saving ended up being the one who did the saving, who showed the teacher what came next, who proved that transformation was always possible. Their story wasn't finished. There would be more chapters to write, more challenges to face, more joy to discover. But the foundation was solid, built on respect and passion, and a love that had grown from the smallest spark into something that could light the world. And that, Penelope thought as she rested her head on Carter's shoulder and felt his heartbeat steady against her cheek, was more than she ever could have hoped for when she opened her door to find him standing there all those years ago. It was everything.